British people of Reddit, how is the American Revolution taught in your schools? It's not taught at all. To be fair, you guys would be teaching dozens of different revolutions if you had to cover all of them. Teresa reasons so many countries have Independence Days. I only ever learned about it to add context to the French Revolution in 6th form. It actually came up in our A-levels and no one could answer the question because we had no idea what happened. People who did history in my school had no idea what happened either, and our teachers were meant to actually cover it. Haha, my history teacher was a supreme racist and focused on our culture to the extent of telling other students not to sit next to white people. Glad I didn't listen to a word that shithead had to say. I failed history. When was this? I'm hoping you're the oldest Redditor ever. Extent of telling other students not to sit next to white people, probably from a colonial nation instead of in the past. Especially in Africa, there's an extreme resentment towards colonizers that has never been given enough spotlight to settle down. It's not part of the national curriculum. We had a small mention of it in the context of discussing the cotton trade, but that was about it. Honestly, we talked about the American Civil War in relation to cotton more than the Revolutionary War, but that might be because I am from Manchester. My understanding is that the American Civil War is what pushed GB to start harvesting cotton in India and Egypt, since the American supply was cut off. In fact, the Confederacy was hoping that GB would help them fight the Union, claiming cotton was an important enough resource for them to protect. Didn't work out the way they hoped though. Not only that we didn't fight, but that Manchester, at the time the world leaders in the cotton weaving business, specifically refused to purchase Southern cotton, even though it accounted for 60% of the industry. Many people lost their jobs at a time when people were unable to afford it. A vote was called for the people of Manchester, and the idea that the embargo would be lifted was defeated by a landslide. Lincoln wrote to the working people of the city, and described their actions of sublime heroism as instrumental in the fight to abolish slavery. It is, perhaps, some of my proudest hometown history. Especially in a town where the history has not always been something to be proud of. That is awesome. Thanks for sharing. I've never heard about the sacrifices folks made overseas during what was always perceived as our fight. Especially growing up in the South, where our education on the Civil War is a little bit biased, to put it mildly. Now I'm curious, I'm from Pennsylvania. What does a Southern education on the Civil War look like? We were basically taught the Civil War in terms of the North representing human rights and equality, and the South fighting for evil power and economic gain on the backs of others, Disney villain style lol. Looking at this, I'm in TN and I'm taking APA's history, and I think someone said it quite well, people tend to not really acknowledge that it was a problem. They teach it in such a way emphasis is placed on the economics vs slavery. I actually grew up more in Illinois and there it's taught more good vs evil. Could have also been that I was in 8th then. Either way, it definitely is taught different in different parts of the country. Nothing. We did lots of Roman, Anglo-Saxon, Viking, Norman stuff, then straight to the World Wars. I think as someone else has said, it's learning about things near your school that you can get to on a school trip. Jorvik Viking Center in York. My most overriding memory of the Jorvik Center is the most musty smell on earth. Edit, thanks for the gold. My first is about the smell of a Viking museum. It wasn't. History lessons I remember were World War I and II, the Battle of Hastings, the Victorians and the Tudors. Edit, people keep asking about all manner of different historical topics. I honestly can't remember other than a couple of things people have jogged my memory on. I wasn't interested in history at school, so my memory and knowledge is limited. I'm in Scotland, so replace Hastings with Stirling Ben Oburn. Don't say Tudor, but always relate it to how they are connected to Mary Queen of Scots. Add in the Jacobites. It's usually covered briefly under the chapter covering the Georgians. We don't learn about the War of 1812 either. The War of 1812 is a footnote even in America. Really? I was taught it was America proving that it wasn't just a flash in the pan, that it wasn't going to relapse and become a colony again. Jackson's victory at the Battle of New Orleans and its role in creating his political persona was also a big deal, never mind that the battle was superfluous. I'm not from the UK, I'm from Thailand, then Siam. During the US Civil War, our king, Rama IV offered Abraham Lincoln a few war elephants to fight the Confederates. However, the offer was declined. They don't teach it. I'm 34 and didn't learn about it at school. Learned about the Roman Empire, Egypt, World Wars I and II and about the British Empire. Mainly Africa and Australia. They mention the War of Independence, but that's about the extent of it. I'm 2 years older, and considering I took history for GCSE, I learned far more history after leaving school. The curriculum never seemed to go deep into the stuff we did. It isn't. To you it was the most important event in history, but to us it was Tuesday, a sideshow to the never-ending wars with France. 134 comments as of the time I write this. No one has mentioned that the word is taught. Hashtag X200B, I'm sorry op. I couldn't not. Please forgive me. That's what I thought. Be gone, thought. They either don't or I didn't pay attention. Probably both, to be honest. Most likely. Although to the Americans, the revolution is extremely important and the founding of their nation, in British history it's just a footnote. The war itself was just seen as a part of the larger war with France. France backed the fledgling USA, trying to distract Britain from the war in Europe. Britain had to invest more heavily in North America than the French did, so it was a worthwhile distraction. The fact that the USA won was a bit of a surprise, to both the French and the British. ITT people act surprised their primary school history courses focus on their home country. It wasn't. In the UK you learn about your own stuff, e.g. Scotland get William Wallace etc., England gets the Tudors and royal family. Then they just hit you with World War II. Except for Wales. Wales also gets England. Us Americans, how is British history taught in us schools? US schools are locally controlled so you can find all kinds of things. In general, US students are taught lots of US history, which includes British history for background and is then intertwined from Jamestown until 1776. They are also taught a generally Eurocentric and English-centric version of world history. This has been exactly my experience, both in school and in people's general knowledge of history. American prehistory is European history. That's where we, the vast majority of contemporary Americans, trace our ancestry. The what? In my school it was taught as a war that was pointless for the British to carry on as India was more valuable in Australia and its gold had just been claimed. Edit, to clear things up, when I refer to the gold in Australia I'm not just referring to the literal gold. I was just too lazy to type that they had just claimed an entire large area of land and all its resources that were presumed to be on that landmass. In the grand scheme of things we were just taught that Britain was too busy with other things to worry about America as much. It isn't really. While it might be America's first war as a nation, I don't think it even makes the top 10 of the most interesting wars that Britain has been involved in. I think the 1364 War of the Pancakes was one of the better ones. It's not. Why would it be? It was a huge deal for America, but for the UK it was just another war in a crapload of wars. Oh well, that's that colony gone, whatever. The only overseas British interest I learned about was India, namely Gandhi and the partition of 1947. I learned about the Reformation, the dissolution of the monasteries, the English Civil War, and all the boring shit that happened before, during, and after. The only bit about America I learned about pre-20th century American history was Francis Drake, and only because he was Elizabeth I's favorite slam piece. Edit to add, we don't even cover our old prison island of Australia, and they still technically, only technically before anyone gets angry, belong to the Commonwealth, so why would we bother with America? Oh, and also I forgot another bit we covered that had a lot about America pre-20th century, the slave trade. It's not or wasn't when I was there. Bold of you to assume it's taught in our schools. We barely covered the wars of the Three Kingdoms properly. To Americans the War of Independence was obviously a huge conflict that led to the founding of a nation. To British, we have so much other military history, mainly Roman invasion, Norman conquest, 100-Year War, War of the Roses, Spanish Armada, English Civil War, Battle of Trafalgar-Waterloo, World War I, World War II to name a few, that it barely gets a mention. We also cover non-military history, for example Kings/Queens of England, life during medieval period, Henry VIII founding the Church of England, slavery, British Empire, Industrial Revolution, and learn a little about ancient history, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Celts, There's a lot to squeeze in that is arguably more relevant to UX development as a nation, so we don't really cover it.